Okay, we're covering 4.6, and this one is number 1. In 4.6, we're going to be dealing with complex fractions, which is a fraction in the numerator and then also a fraction in the denominator. Now, all you need to do is think of this bar here as a division, and if it's so, we can go ahead and rewrite that. So this is the original problem. That's a complex fraction. I'm just going to rewrite it as 19 over 15 divided by, representing that bar, 2 over 5. Okay, now that we write it out, we just go to our rules when it comes to division, dividing out fractions. We know we're going to change that to multiplication, and we are going to write that as the reciprocal, and the reciprocal is 5 over 2. So let's go ahead and rewrite that. So if I write out 19 over 15 multiplied by 5 over 2, now we can apply our multiplication rule, and that is to, I mentioned, just go ahead and write it out as one fraction. So it's 19 times 5 all over 15 times 2. Now, before we multiply it out, we're going to see if we can go ahead and simplify something, and I can already see that I can get a 3 times 5 out of that 15. So I'm just going to rewrite that. So if I rewrite it as 19 times 5 all over, and the 15 I'll represent as 3 times 5 and then times 2. And then we can see the 5s will divide out the 1s. And then when we go ahead, oops, didn't mean to bring all that stuff up. Sorry about that. Okay, so now that we divide out these 5s, we have 19 on top and 6, 3 times 2 is 6 on the bottom. And that's your final answer, because you cannot reduce that down any further. And I'm sorry about the way it's coming up on screen. That's 19 over 6. All right, now let's move over to number 2. Same thing, it's a complex fraction, but this time it has a variable in it. So we have 2x over 21 all over 4 over 7. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it as 2x over 21 divided by 4 over 7. Now the rule states we're going to change this to multiplication, and we want the reciprocal of that. So I'm going to rewrite it as 2x over 21 times, now it's 7 over 4. We know we can rewrite that as one fraction, so it would be 2x times 7 all over 21 times 4. Now I'm going to look to see if I can reduce anything out, and I can see this 21 can break out to 7 times 3, so we can get those 7s to divide out to 1. So I'm going to rewrite it as 2x times 7, and on the bottom we'll represent the 21 as 3 times 7 times, and don't forget, times 4. The 7s divide out to 1, so we're left with, on top you have, change that to black, we have 2x, and on the bottom is 3 times 4, which is 12. Now, if you notice, instead of going and multiplying out, if you look at the 4, you can even break that down as 2 times 2. So to reduce it, we could write it as 2x over 3 times, and the 4 can be represented as 2 times 2. And then we can see the 2's will divide out to 1. So our final answer in simplest form is x over, and a 3 times 2 is 6. So that's your final answer there. Bring that down just in case you're looking at it. And this is a complex fraction, and this was number 2 in your homework. All right, so let's move on to the next one. This is number 3. Now, number 3 is based on order of operations. So number 3. So we have 1/4 plus 1/2 times 1/5. So we need to multiply before we add. So that means we have to work with these two first. So I'm just going to go here off to the side and write it out as 1/2 times 1/5. And I know I'm going to multiply across, so 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 5 is 10. So there's our answer. So 1/10. So I'm going to go back over here and write it as 1/4 plus, now we know it's 1/10. So you just go ahead and follow the process. When you don't have the same denominator, you find your lowest common denominator, which in this one, if we have 4 and we have 10, I can tell you when you finally get up to 20, and the same with this one, you have 10, 20, that's your lowest common denominator right there. So when you go through the process, you'll find yours also. Now I'm going to find my equivalence, set it up with its, oops, and I'll do it over here. Let me just erase this. So I'll take 1/4, and that's equal to 20, and then the 1/10. And we know that 2 times 10 is 20, so 2 times 1 is 2. And then we know 5 times 4 is 20, so 5 times 1 is 5. So here's now our equivalent fractions. I'm going to take them over here. So we have 5 over 20 plus 2 over 20. And if we just add that across as 5 plus 2 over 20, that is simply 7 over 20, and that's in simplest form. You cannot take it any further. So the goal here was to get you to recognize order of operations and what 2 fractions to handle first. Okay, so let's move over to number 4. All right, now number 4 is the same thing, order of operations. So here's number 4. If we have 7/8 divided by, and we have 1/2 times 1/4. So it doesn't matter here if you divide or multiply first. So we have to work from left to right. So we're going to grab these 2 first. So remember that when it's division, you just have to rewrite it as multiplication, and the next fraction is the reciprocal. So, and we're not going to deal with this portion yet. Let's just handle these first 2. So we've learned that we multiply across, but before I do that, I'm just going to write it as 7 times 2, and then this 8, I'm going to write it as 2 times 4. And let's not forget our times 1. So that way we can get that to divide out, the 2's divide out. And then when we multiply across, we have 7 on the top, and then 4 times 1, we have 4. So that is the answer to that. Now we got to take the answer of that, and then don't forget this right here, we have to multiply it by our 1/4. And again, you're just multiplying across. 7 times 1 is 7, and 4 times 4 is 16, and that's in simplest form. You can't take it any further. You're not going to get a 7 out of that 16. All right, let's move on to number 5. So number 5 in your homework, we have 4 squared minus, and then we have a fraction 1/3, which is squared. So I think we're pretty okay with 4 times 4 squared. We understand that's 4 times 4, which equals 16. So 4 squared is 16 minus. Now how do we handle the 1/3 squared? Well, that's the same thing as saying 1/3 times 1/3. Okay, so now let's handle what's inside the parentheses. So equals 16 minus 1 times 1 is just 1, and then 3 times 3 is 9. So that's our fraction when we multiply that out. Now how do we subtract 16 from 1/9? Well, remember 16 as a fraction is expressed like this. So if we have 16 equals 16 over 1. So that becomes 16 over 1 minus 1 over 9. Now you can see we don't have the same denominator. So you can already see the lowest common denominator is going to be 9. So we have 16 over 1, and then we have the 1/9. And then we say to ourselves, okay, well, 1 times 9 is 9, so 1 times 1 is 1. 9 times 1 is 9, so 9 times 16, that's 144. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to write it out as 144 over 9 minus 1 over 9. And you can clearly see that the answer is 143 over 9, because 144 minus 1. And it doesn't simplify any further. That's the final answer there. All right, just looking at the clock. Okay, so let's move on to number 6. Clear this out. So number 6 is order operations again. You have 11 over 6 minus 1/2 in parentheses, and then we're going to divide it out by 11 over 7. So that means you got to handle the fractions inside the parentheses before you can divide out. So let's find our lowest common denominator. So you can see out of a 6 and 2, I can already tell you it's going to be 6. And then I'm going to come up with my equivalents. So 11 over 6, and then we have 1/2 equals, and there's 6 and 6. So now it's, okay, well, 3 times 2 is 6, so 3 times 1 is 3. And then 1 times 6 is 6, so 1 times 11 is 11. So now we can bring these over. So we have 11 over 6 minus 3 over 6. And that's all in parentheses divided by 11 over 7. Now we can see clearly 11 minus 3, we can subtract that out, which we know is 8 over 6. And then we're going to divide that out by 11 over 7. Now, if you want, before you divide it out, you could go over to the side margin. It's more than okay to get that in lowest terms if you wanted to. You can pull out the 2. We have 2 over the 4, and then 2 times 3. That divides out. And then when it's simplified, this 8 over 6, simplified is 4 over 3. You could easily simplify it now if you want to keep working with lower numbers. And then once it's simplified, then you can go ahead and divide it out by the 11 over 7. So now we know when we have it like this, we got to go ahead and change that to multiplication, and we need the reciprocal of that. So this becomes 4 over 3 multiplied by 7 over 11. And we know we're going to multiply that across, so 4 times 7, and then 3 times 11. There's nothing we can get from the top or the bottom to reduce out. So our final answer here would be 28 over 33, and that's already in simplest form. All right, so let's move on to number 7, 8, and 9. I think I'm going to stop the video here, and I'm just going to do a part 2, and I'll finish your last 3 in section 4.6.